recording, so it's recording.
Yes, it's recording.
That's it. It didn't work in K342. I couldn't. Whew. Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'll learn this eventually. Okay, because I want to record it and download the sessions to my computer. But okay, so hi everybody, and today is our short class, and so I have to open up my files here and go to Kingston. That's my file. All right, and then we make this a little bit bigger. Oh, I gotta make sure I use the. Oh, that's nice. Is it on? Testing. Oh, yeah, it's on. Okay, so then I want to open up my lesson plan for today and see what what we need to do. We need to have our debate today on the topic: to South Koreans, more communitarian cultures value nationalism more than individualistic cultures. And okay, so I have a strong tendency to just go off and describe things about that really inspire me. I mean, one of the reasons why I feel fortunate to teach this class is because I'm really interested in nationalism and domestic strategy, political strategy. And I've learned a lot from teaching this methodology course and teaching you and running into this Trompenaars and Hampton Turner book, because I think I've made some breakthroughs, some intellectual breakthroughs, and I've gotten published because of it. And so I really appreciate having the opportunity to teach this class. And so what do we want to highlight now? Let me go through and see what else I have lined up here. The other topics are just to show you how Moldova has been a topic in the news lately because of concern that Russia under Vladimir Putin might invade Moldova next after taking southern Ukraine. Here is a reference in English to an article applying Trompenaars and Hampton Turner's model to understanding business management in the Republic of Moldova. Hooray! And relatively recent article, so written in English, of course. So it's making an impact in a lot of different places. And again, paying homage to Geert Hofstede's previous work as being really the, I guess you would call it the seminal work for studying organizational culture. And then Trompenaars and Hampton Turner developed upon this. But as I mentioned, Trompenaars, Franz Trompenaars was this professor's student. And this man, I think, just died a couple of years ago. So just to show you that there's interest in this in a lot of different places in the Trompenaars and Hampton Turner text. And the issue of corporate culture, I also want to highlight how this topic is important for success anywhere, including in Korea. Here's an article from a few years ago that Samsung is concerned, and the leader of Samsung, Mr. Lee Kun-hee, I think he's out of jail now, or no, J.E. Lee, he's out of jail. Wasn't he pardoned by the president? Moon Jae-in pardoned him. Yeah, everybody gets pardoned eventually. And he said that he needs to change Samsung's strict corporate culture. And he says Samsung's strict corporate culture was holding back innovation. And it sounds like what he wants to do is he wants to introduce more of the incubator corporate culture. It says here, Mr. Lee is trying to bring more of that incubator corporate culture to Samsung, so that Samsung is more innovative and creative. Although Samsung is still pretty impressive in terms of its ability to compete around the world as it is. So, of course, there was some mistakes made. This article is 5 years old with the introduction too soon of the Galaxy Note 7, a phone that caught on fire, used to had a tendency to break. I have a Samsung. I love my cell phone. I got this less than a year ago. So this is my friend. But that was a big problem. But of course, Samsung, I never encounter that history or that experience in the media again. So I think Samsung is a lot in American media news because Samsung is the producer of semiconductors, and semiconductors are in short supply around the whole world. And yeah, so he was quite upset by that mistake that happened. So So do you think, please respond to the following statement. An organization with a strong tradition of hierarchical direction like Samsung, he's claiming it's more family. What are the four elements of the different cultures we've covered before? And I got to make sure, am I sharing that screen? Was I sharing the screen? I have to make sure I remember to share the screen. That there are four different types of corporate culture. And if we go to the, I showed you this last class, right? The four different corporate cultures. These four different cultures are ideal typical images, ideal typical models that Max Weber came up with this notion of an ideal typical extreme. So these are ideal abstracts. And at one point in the book, they say that South Korea has more of a family-oriented culture in its organizations. And I think I would agree, including, for example, how Catholic University of Korea treats me. Catholic University of Korea, I can even sense as an organization, its culture is not the same as an American university. Like, they provide housing. I arrived, they gave me a place to live, right? They emphasize that they will take care of us. That if you work for Catholic University of Korea, we have the excellent medical care, right? In the US, that's up to you to choose, to organize. Nobody's going to find you a place to live once you get a job with the in any organization in the US. Not to mention make decisions about the quality of your healthcare. That's up to you to choose who's going to be your doctors. And so these are the four images. It sounds like South Korean cultures heavily are family, but maybe when they get to be large, like Samsung, they're more Eiffel Tower, right? That there are elements of, there can be elements of all four or different mixes of these elements. So South Korea under the Chaebol system has a combination of family and Eiffel Tower, particularly when they were starting and developing early on during the industrialization. And now as they become very large, they become more Eiffel Tower oriented. And it sounds like Mr. Lee wants to bring back some more this incubator culture into Samsung's culture. And it's, like I said, it's very difficult to change a company's culture. Typically, it only happens, as I told you, most mergers and acquisitions, that's a quote from Trump on ours, 70% of mergers and acquisitions are disappointing. They don't work. They have big plans. They have big projections for the profits that they will produce, and they don't produce the profits. And sometimes they just fail, as I already mentioned, the case of the merger of Daimler-Benz and Chrysler. And only when one of the companies goes bankrupt, it's dead. It's a catastrophe. Then in the case of Fiat, it took over Chrysler and apparently was successful in utilizing the remaining Chrysler assets, which were much smaller when Chrysler went bankrupt. It was a much smaller company than when Daimler-Benz attempted to merge with Chrysler in the late 1990s. But it seems to me there's elements of family and Eiffel Tower culture in large Korean organizations. And so back to the exercise, if I can find it here. So my question to you is a very quick vote. Please respond to the following statement. An organization with a strong tradition of hierarchical direction like Samsung can become more participatory through directives by senior management. That's the point. In the incubator culture, it's horizontal. There's not rigid hierarchies. There's not a commander. There's not a general. It's more startup, like early Amazon or early Apple, Microsoft. And there's not strong hierarchies. People work for love of the product. Do you think Samsung can succeed and possibly succeed in promoting more autonomous participatory behavior by ordering it, that the senior management orders you to be more participatory and autonomous? I order you. Is that possible? And that's just a quick question. I want you to think about and ask you to vote on that. And so let's go then to the Cyber Campus. Okay, I forgot to open up Cyber Campus. So let me open up Cyber Campus here. No, I'm sorry. www.CUK. Okay, go here. And then we go to English and Cyber Campus and log in. And I got to log in. And then we go here. And then close that. And then we go to, here we go. And we go to, I think, which one is vote? Tepu? Tupyo? Tupyo? Tupyo. Okay, Tupyo. And so let me see. You can see I have a lot of these too many of these exercises. I might have to delete some of these when after class. Did I not set that up? Just a second. I guess maybe, yes. So please vote on this topic and make sure that you can see that. And just 1 minute as to whether or not you think Samsung can make itself more incubator startup in its culture. And I think there's wide disagreement. There's not a consensus in the class as to whether or not Mr. Lee can carry that out. Now, of course, we're in a time of global crisis with the war in Ukraine and the imposition of sanctions on Russia and conflict with China. It's hard for me to imagine a corporation like Samsung becoming more incubator-like, particularly at a time of rising international conflict and tensions around the whole planet. But those are typically the challenges that these companies face. I can't think of a large company that is still, maybe Facebook. You know, Facebook has moved to change its name. From one way to change the culture is that, look, we have to change our culture. We have to change people's thinking. One way to begin is change our name. So it's now Meta, because they're going to focus on the Meta universe. And Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, is trying to shift his entire huge Facebook Meta organization towards Web3 and metaverse and new creations of new technologies with in the new internet web, virtual reality and artificial intelligence areas. And it will be interesting to see if he's able to redevelop that incubator model or style at such a huge corporation like Facebook Meta. Okay. And it might well be an issue of corporate survival for Facebook, because their business model is under attack. They're sharing a gathering of data on personal users like you and me is being restricted. Apple is restricting them. Other companies are restricting them. So it's an issue of survival. I think from the point of view of Mark Zuckerberg, that the old Facebook social advertising, media advertising model for profitability is no longer going to be as feasible as corporations and governments seek to restrict gathering of private information, personal information of its users like you and me in the name of privacy and also national security, right? That we don't want, foreign corporations gathering personal data about everybody in South Korea because that could be a problem for South Korea's national security, supposedly. Okay, so, and then back to I think we got through most of the notes at the last class. Again, some challenges, I think next chapter, you're going to read about ascription versus achievement for giving status. And in South Korea, it's a society which tends to emphasize the role of group and background in terms of giving status. So students told me in the past in this class that when South Koreans meet each other for the first time, one of the first questions that they will ask is their age. Like, are you older than me or not? Because that makes a difference. Even if you're 1 or 2 years older, that is an important piece of information to have. You don't do that in the United States. You don't even want to share your age typically, because we have a bias against old people in the United States. Maybe all societies do, but particularly in the United States. And so this is how you award status or honor in society versus ascription versus achievement. And ascription means your background gives you status. You don't do anything now. It's just where you come from. A famous family. Did you graduate from a famous university? You might not be, or I might not be a very smart person, but if my father got me into Harvard, because, or my father or my mother got me into AWA University, or my father or my family got me into Seoul National University because they paid somebody, or they were able to, you've heard these stories in Korea. They also happen in the United States, that we say America is the least ascriptively oriented society in the world, that we count in America, we only count on what you do, what you achieve. Achievement, 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 not ascription, not ascription. Your background, your family name, the color of your skin. We don't care so much about that in America. And of course we do. We do. It makes a difference if you get into Harvard. And I've met some students from Harvard who were not very bright. And I won't mention names, but you can get into Harvard because your mother or father went to Harvard. You can get into Harvard if the university receives money from you. If I'm a rich man and I want my son or daughter to go to Harvard, if I give Harvard $1 million, or Yale or Stanford or Princeton $1 million, that will help in Princeton deciding whether or not to let my son into Princeton, even though my son's grades and SAT scores are not sufficiently high. So, and here, this of course was a big scandal that emerged a couple of years ago, Varsity Blues, where famous people, including famous actresses and actors and designers, were working with someone to bribe universities to let their sons and daughters to go to Yale and Stanford. Because even if I am not a very smart student, if I get a degree from Yale, people are impressed, even though I might not be very smart and very creative. And once you get in to these universities, you might not have a high grade point average, but you still went to Yale. I still went to Harvard. I still went to Stanford. So even in America, we're very aware of the role of ascription in terms of what is the name of the university you graduated from. And so this is the called Operation Harvard Blues, where the Federal Bureau of Investigation was investigating how people were bribing college administrators to let their sons and daughters into very famous schools like Wake Forest, University of Southern California, USC, Georgetown, UCLA, and other prestigious schools. I went to Ohio State. We're only prestigious in football. That's not fair, no, but so even in the US, ascription is important. It's just that we have this image about that romantically positive image of an American. We don't care about background. We only care about what you do now, what you achieve now, what you achieve since you joined our company, your sales record, your innovations. We don't care about what you did in the past. That's the immediate beginning of the American romantic stereotype self-image. Even though, of course, we do care about ascription, but we don't like to admit it to ourselves. Whereas other societies, like in East Asia, they begin typically with, your obligation to your family, your obligation to people who are older than you, Confucian societies, right? Confucian cultures. And of course, it makes a difference in other societies. But typically that's a point made by Trompenaars, that we have this image that the key to being modern is to focus upon achievement, and he makes that point that I think that's that's the key to developing, that a backward society awards status through ascription, whereas a modern society, because of this American romantic self-image that is propagated by American nationalism and American power and influence, but since 1945, since the end of the Second World War, this romantic stereotype is propagated around the world that to be modern, you have to be like America. And Americans will tell you, to be American, we don't care about your background. We only care about your skills and your achievements. And that's, he says that's it's not true. That's not accurate. And you can see where ascriptive societies like China, like Korea, like East Asian societies have shown you, you can marry ascription and achievement very effectively to rapidly develop your countries. And maybe even in the case of China, eventually become the most powerful country in the world very soon here. I mean, I was your age. I was younger than you. No, I was your age when China began its reforms in the late 1970s. And so in the time from, in 45 years, it's gone from being a terribly poor country to the second biggest economy in the world. Just in 40 years, which, I'm 59. That wasn't that long ago. I graduated from college from high school when China began to economically develop. And so, this focus on, this is an opinion piece from somebody writing in Afghanistan when the Americans, of course, were still there, claiming that, what does he conclude? Definitely the modern democratic, he says, the modern democratic capitalist systems cannot calm down the people unless they deal with the issue of mobility, social mobility, status, right? Wealth and status in society, increasing your status. Can you increase your status through your achievement? They have to make sure that the mobility through different classes is smooth and it follows the concept of meritocracy. What do you achieve? Not what your background is or who your father was. They have to appreciate the achieved status and develop a positive competition among the people and try to discourage ascribed status as much as possible. Socioeconomic classes must only serve as of the variety in the society and must not become the root cause of discrimination of one class in the hand of the other ones. Otherwise, the result is frustration and demonstration. Well, apparently, the American model that was exported to Afghanistan over 20 years didn't succeed. Which is very interesting because, of course, in August, the United States left and the Afghan government collapsed and the Taliban came back into power after defeating America and its allies in Afghanistan. So during the time of the Japanese occupation, Koreans could achieve complete equality with Japanese in terms of social mobility if they tried to assimilate. In other words, if they became fully Japanese, if you were agreed to become fully Japanese, spoke only Japanese language, adopted a Japanese name, could you achieve complete social mobility? Could you rise as far as possible in Japan, in the Japanese Empire, if you became culturally Japanese when Korea was part of the Japanese Empire? So do you strongly agree, neither agree or disagree or strongly disagree? And so we go back to the cyber campus, and I think I have that somewhere here. Yes. So, what's your view? Could you, I think Pak Chung-hee, he had a Japanese name. I can't remember what his Japanese name was when he was a lieutenant in the Japanese Imperial Army, serving in Manchuria. He graduated first in his class from the Japanese Imperial Military Academy. Pak Chung-hee was #1 in his class. And I can't remember what his Japanese name was. But if Pak Chung-hee wanted to become Prime Minister of Japan, if Japan had not lost the Second World War, could he have become Prime Minister or some top leader of Japan? So there's no right or wrong answer here, right? I just want you to think about this. So some of you, see, what did you, 2 agree or strongly disagree? Who's 3? Disagree. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we have nationalist movements, national self-determination movements, because people come to believe, rightly or wrongly, that it doesn't matter how hard you try. If you're Korean, you are always going to be second class in the Japanese Empire, and or in the British Empire, or in the French Empire, or in the whatever empire. And coming up with definitions of empire is an interesting question. Could a Muslim become president of the United States? That's what Donald Trump was promoting, that Barack Hussein Obama, he's really a Muslim. Oh. Barack Obama was not born in America. He's not really American. And Donald Trump was able to win the 2016 election using that strategy as part of his political strategy. But a black man was elected president and reelected in the United States. So maybe ascription really is weak. It doesn't disappear everywhere in any society. But from my understanding, Israel and US are two of the least descriptively oriented societies in the world. I used to think South Korea was that way as well, partly because of the tremendous revolutionary suffering and change that happened here as a result of the Japanese occupation and then the Korean War. But anyway, so I think that's your reading for next week. You'll read about ascription versus achievement. But let's go back then to the debate topic for this week. And the debate topic in the lesson plan is here. And to South Koreans, more communitarian cultures value nationalism more than individualistic cultures. And as I look at all of you, I think, are pro when I read your paragraphs. So if that's the case, let me create a breakout rooms. And I guess we should have let's have 3 rooms, pro 1 and pro 2, and 1 for con. And if nobody wrote con, then I'll have to be con. And so this is assigned automatic or manually here. If I want to assign, no, if I let you assign, you can choose. Is that number 2 here? Sutong iyo ho ha. You can choose which one you want. Yeah, that's one. Okay. So we'll rename this as pro 1, pro 2, and con. Okay, and then so please join the groups you want to join, pro 1 or pro 2. How about, well, let me assign, unless people have changed their minds, I'm going to assign you to pro 1 or pro 2. And if somebody wants to be con, they can. Otherwise, if nobody wants to be con, I will be con. Okay, so please join your groups and I will respond as con. And then if I change your mind, you can vote. And I think I set it up so you can vote anonymously on the, let me go back to the screen share and find that tupio debate topic. And is that anonymous? Ikmyong, Chomyo Ja, Chunbuka, Konke Dwachi, So Nida. Is that anonymous? Okay, so it's anonymous. So if I change your mind in the debate, you can change your mind in how you vote on the debate topic. So you have is that it? No, breakout rooms. Is that it? Yeah. Okay. So you have 60. Who's going to speak first for pro 1 and pro 2? So heads, it's the top person, and it is tails. So Keiku, Kritika Keu, and Lee Ju Young will speak first for pro 1 and pro 2. They will speak first. So help Kritika Keu and Lee Ju Young prepare. So Kwan De-uk, you can talk with Ijo Young, and Gloria Kate can communicate with Kritika to help Kritika communicate. So you have 1 minute. And if I win, if we vote and I win as Khan, I get to have a piece of my own chocolate. If you win, you get to have the rest of that chocolate. Okay, and so then we're going to flip a coin. And stand up and look around. Oh, okay. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so who will speak first? Pro always goes first. So Kritika or Lee Ju-young. Heads, it's Kritika. Oh. And it is tails. So Lee Ju-young will speak first for Pro. So Lee Ju-young, where's Lee Ju-young? Is Lee Ju-young here? No, Lee Ju-young is virtual. Okay, Lee Ju-young, please make your Pro statement, Lee Ju-young.
Okay, so I'm pro, and basically communitarian culture and individual culture are clearly different. So first of all, individualistic culture is a society that values individuals' interest over community interest. Individualistic culture respects each individual's ego and constitutes a society containing diversity. In addition, there is a little risk of being suppressed by unjust power. However, if this culture is excessive, it can turn into a selfish society and cause social problems by pursuing only personal interest. Communitarian cultures constitutes one's identity in community traditions, relationships, and ideologies. Therefore, members of the community form solidarity with each other and strive for the interests of the community. Because of these characteristics in a communitarian culture society, it tends to transform into a society that is more exclusive and chauvinistic than an individual culture society. Therefore, it can be said that communitarian culture value nationalism that pursues the interests of one's own country or people rather than individualistic cultures.
Okay, so I'm Khan because nobody else signed up for Khan, so I'm Khan. So I have to come up with a counter argument. And my counter argument is this. I suggest, Lee Ju-young, that instead, what these individualistic versus communitarian cultures mean in terms of the Trompenaars framework is that their romantic self-images that they have, that they understand the romantic positive self-image of an American is individualistic. But whereas in other societies, because of their different histories, different circumstances, they might have a communitarian focus. What is the ideal American? My impression of the ideal American is the cowboy. You know what a cowboy is? You watch American Western films. The cowboy, he takes care of himself. He carries a gun. He's a rugged individualist. He lives out on the frontier, in the wild frontier. He takes care of himself. He establishes his own well-being. He pursues his dreams. And that is the romantic image of an American. Whereas maybe in I don't know enough about Confucian cultures, but like, let's pick on Japan, right? What might be the image in Japan? The romantic image is the shogun. I mean, the samurai, someone who serves his lord and obeys and is focused on the well-being of the group, the samurai. In fact, somebody who is not a vassal to a lord, a swordsman in Japan who is not serving a lord, his name is a ronin, right? And from my discussion with Japanese people, there's something disliked about ronin. You're a swordsman and you haven't submitted loyalty, you haven't sworn loyalty to somebody. What are you, some kind of bandit? Ronin is not a good thing. In terms of my understanding in Japanese culture. Samurai good, Ronin bad. A Ronin is a rogue. A Ronin is a bandit. A Ronin is somebody who's not a good actor in society. So, all right, so having pointed that, does that mean Americans are less likely to be nationalistic than Japanese? When I look at how America has expanded its influence throughout the world, how America got involved in Vietnam in that war and did terrible, terrible things. And this is something that Vladimir Putin in Russia is continually pointing out. And I have to say, I'm fascinated by the American media coverage of what's going on in Ukraine today. That the American media, which is trying to satisfy its consumers, its readers, because it's a very competitive business. It's a business. The media, the news media is a business in America. So people have to want to consume your product. That means you have to write what they want to read. And they talk about the terrible things that the Russian Air Force did in Ukraine cities. And like what the Ukrainians did the Russian Air Force did 10 years ago in Aleppo, or several years ago in Syria and bombing Aleppo and destroying Aleppo. Vladimir Putin pointed out a few years ago, do you know what the Americans did in Mosul when they were fighting the Islamic State? They leveled that city, Mosul, one of the biggest cities in the Middle East. When the Islamic State took over in 2014, they destroyed it. Does anybody mention that in the American media reports? No. It's something about America, about human beings. It's not just about Americans. People tend to see a world in a way that allows them to feel good about themselves and doing what they want to do, what they think they need to do against a perceived challenge, threat, or opportunity. And so this element in Homo sapiens, I think, that emerges is this strong nationalist tendency to engage in collective forgetting, selective collective perception, only remembering and keeping in mind what I want to keep in mind. What the Americans did in Mosul. Oh, we're not going to even, what's Mosul? I don't know. And I think this is a tendency in all human beings. It's something about Homo sapiens. Like I tell my other classes, right? Political scientists are zoologists who study Homo sapiens. And what that means is Homo sapiens tend to engage in-group versus out-group formation, and they tend to engage in a process of collective psychological behavior and perception that becomes strongly stereotypical, including selective forgetting, selective perception, to engage in, as part of the mobilization process of strong national groups, Germans, Russians today. I mean, Vladimir Putin believes, and his supporters, I think, really believe that Ukraine is controlled by Nazis, that they're trying to fight Nazis and who are controlling and dominating Ukraine, and they really believe it. We might say that's ridiculous, but Donald Trump believes that he really believed that Barack Hussein Obama was a closet Muslim, that Barack Hussein Obama was not born in the US. He really believes that he won the election in 2020 and it was stolen from him. He really believes that. So the question is, how many people support Donald Trump or Adolf Hitler and his conspiracy theory of the Jews controlling the world? And we need to kill them all if we're going to save Germany. Only 0.6% of the population in Germany was Jewish when Hitler came to power, less than 1%. And he really believed that. Vladimir Putin really believes that the Nazis are controlling Ukraine. And this is a tendency we see among Homo sapiens in general. So I'm not so certain that countries that are individualistic do not engage in nationalism or less likely to be nationalistic, particularly if they're powerful and influential around the whole planet, like the Americans are, or the British were in the 19th century, that they will make themselves do and believe and do what they need to do to defend their political influence interests as a nation. I mean, before Joe Biden became president, right? Some human rights organizations pointed out that on average, under the Trump administration, the Obama administration, the US dropped 72 bombs a day. United States Air Force dropped 72 bombs a day around the world. Every day, 72. Every day, 72 bombs. And then the Americans criticize China's human rights policies. How many bombs does China drop on people? Anyway, okay, so let's go on because this is a short class. So Kritika. Right? Kritika? Oh, you're Kritika.
So I think that it's possible that South Koreans think that communitarian cultures value nationalism more because like any type of achievement or failure is seen as a result of the actions of all group members instead of just one. And according to Trumpreneurs, the idea of individualism stems from like a more modernized society, whereas communitarianism is like the need to maintain traditions. And I think that need could be linked back to nationalism. And because I think the communitarian cultures want to dedicate their success to all group members, and they want to put like a greater significance that everyone contributed to the success. So they it pushes the narrative that like, oh, this company or this nation is full of like useful people, and individualism is more of like they're more open to globalization, so they're more open to like new ideas or leaving space for individual praise and promotion.
Since again, I'm Khan, I was assigned Khan. So my response is that you mentioned narratives, and narratives are stories. A narrative is a story. And of course, Americans have a story. Samsung has a story. South Korea has a story. Cambodia has a story. Russia has a narrative. China has a narrative. Narratives are rhetorical methods by which we try to persuade and influence others. And we will always come up with a narrative that reflects our background. So the Americans have this romantic image of the rugged individualist cowboy on the American frontier. And they will attempt to explain themselves to you, particularly if they know nothing really about you. So if I'm going to deal with you, I will, as a human tendency, tend to project myself into you. I will assume if I don't know you and I need to still deal with you and address you, that you are like me. I will tend to assume you're like me, even if it's not true, which is typically not true. But the Americans also have to talk to themselves. The Americans have to convince their own societies about what they're doing. Like Vladimir Putin is trying to convince his Russian society that Ukraine is controlled by neo-Nazis who are decadent and degenerates. And people may or may not believe that, but they will always adapt the narrative to justify to themselves and hopefully to you that what they are doing is good, not just for me, it's good for you too. And if I can convince you that what I want is good for you, it's easier to control you. This is a realist perspective. Hans Morgenthau used to talk in these terms, in terms of nationalistic universalism. States will always cloak the output of their foreign policy process in broadly appealing religious or ideological symbols. Those ideologies might be liberalism one decade, maybe fascism in another decade, maybe communism in another time and place, maybe religion 500 years ago. Why are we conquering the natives? Because we're going to make them Christian and save their souls from hell. That's why we're enslaving the Indians in the New World. But I don't know how much those ideologies really actually prevent a country from doing what it needs to do to win. Like when the Americans dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan and killed mostly civilians, overwhelmingly civilians, lots of children, lots of women, not to mention men. And almost all those people were civilians. Now, the Americans can tell you how that was a good act for individualism, for promoting freedom, but was it really necessary? Or was it the convenient, easy way to get rid of a hated enemy? Okay, so who's next? Juan.
Well, thank you, Mr. De Dominicis, for your conview. It is right to say that it is important to look at this topic as narrative or political power, but I want to focus on the history because in case of Korea, over 5,000 years, Korean lived as agricultural dynasty, and it means to sustain each own land and lives, Koreans developed nations and became nationalistic to resist against foreign invasions like Mongolian or Ming or Qing. So as these historic traces still remain in Korean culture, as you know, before pandemic, Korean universities or Korean companies usually hold membership training to socialize themselves as communitarian culture. And I think it's right to say that South Koreans tend to prefer communitarian cultures, and this social atmosphere reflects and even towards nationalism. That's why Koreans really enjoy national sports events like the Olympics or FIFA World Cup. Not only the Korean Peninsula, it can be another example on Korean diaspora. In case of Korean who worked for Germany for making money, they overcome discrimination and heavy labors by nationalism to encourage Korean poor economy. And another example could be Koreans in Japan. We call them Zainichi. They deny to assimilate in Japan, and they make their ethnic community, and they use Korean name, and they make their own credit union, and they use Korean name and make Korean national school or their own ethnic businesses. So I think to South Korean, communitarian cultures remain and it towards nationalism, I think.
Okay. And we're running short of time. I remember I got to convert that file. So your name is, what is your name?
Pro, I think 그 when professor said about 잠깐 sorry I cannot summarize my opinion yet. So so I just thought about I cannot organize my idea yet. So I just heard about professor said that as you said, Vladimir Putin invaded Russia and invaded Ukraine, and the example of Nazis, German Nazis. So if they are invaded in order to prove their community symbolization, it is better for everyone. And this, if they had the idea about that, they didn't have any each person's individual characterism. They cannot think of that. Some people they didn't want about this. didn't want about that war about this. So in this, if I live in Korea, South Korea, and I'm Korean, we have more great opinion about community. It is good for everyone to voice. can I somewhere?
I'm not so good at English, so maybe not good speech, but time's not left. Personalism is not egoism, is it? So, and men cannot live without community because we have clothes or food, many things, but we cannot make it own self. So we need community in our life. So communitarianism is important, but it cannot be pushed to personal men because we have to save their own freedom or rights, and emphasizing of nationalism ignore them. So I looked your comment in my essay at rest night. So I really think about those communitarianism and nationalism or personalism really long time this night, but I cannot make my essay rebel. Can I satisfied about it? So if I can, if it's a role, I'll make it a rebel. I can satisfy in weekend. So can you see my essay again? Okay.
Okay, so I just remembered I have to convert this file. And so please vote. And on this question, please. And pro one, although I did get 2 votes. Okay, so that's it for today. And so let me